This is my world building sketchbook. It's different than every other one that I run with currently because this one is dedicated to only having things that wrap themselves around the book that I've been writing, or rather, the books that I've been writing for the last 2 years. I've wanted to do something like this for a long time. In fact, I started my first version of this maybe 15 or 20 years ago when I bought 3 different sketchbooks for the 3 stories that I work with, titled each one of them for that particular story, and then basically got 1 page done in each one and put them to the side. What I did, unfortunately, was build up a high level of pressure for myself. Because these stories matter to me. They're things that I want to get down, things that I want to share with people. But having a sketchbook that was limited to that thing alone made me feel as if every page in there had to be perfect. So what's different this time? Well, first of all, I'm older. And I'm actually fairly invested in the story now. I understand it much more thoroughly than I did. It's funny, but when you start to play with a world, when you start to write a story, you think that you understand it far more than you do because all of the gaps are filled in with your emotions, with your excitement. As you start to actually put pen to paper, though, you start to find all of these holes, all of these things that need to be filled. For some, that can be discouraging, but for me, I found it exciting. All of a sudden, I have to describe what this town looks like. This town that's existed in my mind, and oh goodness, I hadn't thought about what they eat. I hadn't thought about how people get into the town. I hadn't thought about where the forges are, or maybe they don't have forges. Maybe they get everything from a neighboring city. All of those kinds of questions were fun and continue to be fun. I enjoy each time I get to a new setting and I have to figure it out. But how does that change this particular sketchbook? And why is this one so much less intimidating? I decided to take a page out of Tolkien's rulebook on how he managed his own world building. For those of you who don't know, Tolkien, who wrote The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, envisioned himself as a person who is actually discovering long-lost content. You might have heard the term the Red Book of Westmarch thrown around. In fact, there's actually a Tolkien YouTube lore channel that is called that. Tolkien envisioned that he had found this book, this lost tome of histories, and he, as a philologist, began to interpret it, began to bring it into modern English so that people could read it. This is the book that we read as The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And even in universe, The Hobbit is written by Bilbo when he gets back home. It's called There and Back Again, A Hobbit's Tale, or A Hobbit's Holiday. And Frodo, when he gets back from the destruction of the ring, writes the book that we now know as The Lord of the Rings. This is then, of course, passed on to Sam, who continues to edit it and add things. It's then passed on to his daughter. At some point, it makes its way to Merry and Pippin, and then at some far future point, to my understanding, it makes its way to Gondor. So when Tolkien is translating this fictional book into another fictional book, there is some leeway. Not everything has to be perfect. In fact, discrepancies that do exist can kind of be couched in terms of, well, those are just translation errors. So I decided to do something similar. This world-building sketchbook is designed to have been done by an early cartographer, 100 or more years before the story that I'm writing right now takes place. This cartographer lived in the country that I am drawing right now, called Tulia, and he embarked with his master on a journey. And so over the course of this sketchbook, I am going to explore the places that he did on his journey. And of course, he is only able to draw so well, just like me, and he is only aware of so many things. So the maps of places that he knows, places that he was able to get an accurate map for, are going to be more accurate. And the descriptions and the information that he gives are going to be accurate from his perspective. This allows me to escape some of that stress and anxiety, feeling like I have to have everything figured out. I'm able to just explore as if I am that character exploring the world. This is not only exciting, but it does allow that escape from the fear and trepidation of having to have everything correct the first time. All right, so 5 minutes in, and I'm not sure we've made any point yet. But here is the thing. This is why I am recording this and why I think that this series is going to be rather interesting, especially if you are going to come along with me and create your own world building sketchbook or even just work on some world building of your own. This approach is a fun and interesting and a little bit different way to engage with the art of crafting a world. As you draw things, you think about them in a different way than if you were just to write them out. And even if you're not a particularly good drawer, not a very good draftsperson, you are capable of doing what Tolkien did. Many would not consider him a very accomplished artist, and yet he drew the first renditions of many of the maps and symbols and things that we see in his books. His son later redid most of them, from my understanding. But again, I do not know that Christopher Tolkien was a trained artist. Maybe he just got into it because he had these worlds of his father's that he needed to bring into existence. So even if you are a writer only, there's no reason why you can't do this. You can even incorporate notes that apologize to the people reading for the haphazard drawings because you're actually a scribe following along behind someone. And it's not the fact that you're good at drawing, but it's the fact that somebody has to draw these things, and you are the one who got appointed the task. Those kinds of things can cover you. They can take away some of the expectation of perfectionism and accuracy, and they can make it fun and intriguing. Imagine reading through a book and there's a bunch of sketches at one point that aren't very good, but they're just trying to describe this monster that the party encountered. Those haphazard, lazily, or poorly done drawings could actually end up being part of the story. And drawing gives you a way to explore things that is quite different than writing. I find that my worlds come to life when I think about them from multiple angles. But also in this sense, and in some of the pages that I've covered already in this sketchbook, though I'm only maybe 7 pages in, I'm thinking about statues, about sculptures, about the necessary components of a city, about the foods that these people eat. How do they store the foods? Where are the foods grown? All of these things are so important to building a world that feels lived in. No, perhaps you don't want to spend paragraph upon paragraph explaining and info dumping all this information, but you don't have to. You can show tiny little pieces of it here and there. Mention a critter that lives in this location or a food that someone is munching on. Those little details are picked up by our unconscious and subconscious minds and make the world feel more real and lived in. This is part of the reason why Star Wars and Lord of the Rings feel so real and believable in their own ways. Star Wars has a very unique, for the time period that it came out, aesthetic in that everything feels old. We don't necessarily notice it on the first watch, but our world is very much the same way, and so there are pieces of Tatooine that just feel believable. Likewise, in Tolkien's work, whether you're watching the movies or reading the books, there are all these locations that are not pertinent to what's happening right now, and yet there's history there. There's always history there. And that is believable, because that's how our world is too. We don't have everything explained. We're never going to know exactly what Tom Bombadil is, or who Ungoliant was, Shelob's mother, the giant spider outside of Mordor. We don't know. Tolkien may have known and just decided not to tell us, but I like to believe that he didn't, that he incorporated these things into his text because real life has mystery, and he knew that including mysteries in his work would make them feel more real. But how does this apply to you? How can this be something that you use? Well, I'm hoping that if you are listening to this nearly 10 minutes in, that you also have worlds that you want to bring to life, or at the very least, the concept and idea is entertaining and interesting to you. I would encourage you to dedicate some space. If you feel stressed about the idea of dedicating an entire sketchbook to it, then don't. You can get any loose piece of paper, just a couple pages here and there in your sketchbook. It doesn't really matter. whatever is going to be comfortable and interesting for you. If you do have the ability to dedicate an entire sketchbook that way, and you, like me, are now at a place where that's not going to make it intimidating and your expectations are going to make it difficult to work, I would encourage you to do so though, because the final result could potentially be something very intriguing. But I would encourage you to do some world building for your worlds and do it artistically. In the next session, I'm actually going to start with some crests and symbols for this city. I have been toying with this idea for a very long time. This place has existed in my mind for years and years, probably close to 20 now. And yet I've only started writing the content for this place in the last 3 to 5 months. And so I'm finally confronted with, what does it look like? What do the people live like? And so in that next session, I'm going to start working on crests, on thinking about symbolism, and how that might be represented in this particular place. So I would encourage you to come along with me into that next session as well, and think about symbols, and how symbols can become very important in any world that you build. Well, thank you for listening. I would love to hear in the comments below any of your thoughts or anything specific that you would like me to hit on in some of the upcoming world building sessions. I'm planning on doing things involving food and agriculture. I'm going to continue to work on more maps like this, and each particular region has a cover page of sorts that is just a beautiful drawing. So I hope you will come along, and I hope more than that you will make your own. I would love to hear about them and see them at some point. If you're looking to join a community with like-minded artists who are bringing worlds to life or just working on all kinds of random stuff, you can check out the link below to our Discord server. Thank you to patron Who, What, Where, When for your continued support, and if you want to check out the Patreon, the link is down below next to the Discord link. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.